Welcome, everyone. Today, I'll be diving into the chilling 2020 horror thriller, Would You Rather? Be warned, spoilers are ahead, so proceed with caution. The story begins with Iris, a young woman who, despite lacking experience, is interviewing for a waitressing job at a restaurant. As she nervously explains to the interviewer, she recently moved back home due to a tragic accident involving her parents, which left her responsible for caring for her brother. Though the interviewer doesn't guarantee her the job, Iris leaves with a glimmer of hope, setting the stage for the unsettling journey that lies ahead. The next morning, as Iris sits at the table calculating expenses, her brother prepares breakfast nearby. She asks if he'll be okay on his own for a bit, explaining that she needs to visit the clinic to see his doctor in hopes of finding a way to reduce the costs of his treatment. Later, at the clinic, she pauses to hold the door open for a woman in a wheelchair before heading into the doctor's office. Inside, she's introduced to a man named Lambrick, who joins them. Lambrick calmly assures Iris that he can offer the help she so desperately needs. Dr. Barden shares more about Lambrick, explaining that he's established clinics worldwide, and that he and his family are passionate about helping people in situations like hers. Curious yet cautious, Iris asks what she would need to do to receive this help. Lambrick invites her to a dinner party at his mansion, explaining that she simply has to play a game, and if she wins, she secures all the support her brother needs. Although hesitant about the unusual offer, Iris listens as Dr. Barden reassures her, sharing that he once found himself in a similar position, and Lambrick's assistance had been real and transformative. Still, Iris is uncertain, knowing her brother's condition is critical and a bone marrow transplant is his only hope. Lambrick gives Iris until that night to make her decision, adding that he can also help find a donor for her brother. Later, as Iris and her brother sit down for dinner, her phone rings with disappointing news. The job recruiter informs her she didn't get the position. Weighing her options, Iris considers reaching out to Lambrick, recalling a painful memory of driving home with her brother after learning she wasn't a match for his bone marrow transplant. Though she feels guilt over not being able to help directly, her brother reassures her that it isn't her fault. Determined, Iris picks up Lambrick's business card and makes the call. The next morning, Iris tells her brother she'd be going out that evening, but rather than revealing her real plans, she says she's meeting some old friends from high school. She dresses for the dinner party, and soon a car arrives to pick her up. During the ride, she recalls a conversation with her brother, who had once asked if she truly wanted her own life, to which she'd replied, reassuring him that they would get through everything together. When she arrives at Lambrick's grand estate, the butler, Bevins, greets her and escorts her inside. As Iris steps into the room, Bevins introduces her as the 8th guest, and two men approach her, striking up a conversation that only deepens the mystery of the night ahead. Cal introduces himself as being from Seattle and Lucas as hailing from Iowa. They offer Iris a drink and fill her in on the other guests: Peter, a high-stakes gambler from Vegas; Linda, the woman in the wheelchair, whom Iris recognizes and waves to; Travis, a veteran from Iraq; Amy, a quiet young woman; and the older gentleman, Conway, who holds some conspiracy theories about the Lambricks. Finally, Iris receives her drink, absorbing the strange energy in the room. Meanwhile, Dr. Barden is elsewhere, lost in thought, sipping his own drink as he recalls a conversation with Lambrick in his office right after Iris had left, wondering if this opportunity will truly bring her the help she seeks. Dr. Barden hesitates, thinking Iris may not be right for Lambrick's game given her sick brother, but Lambrick insists she's perfect for it, handing the doctor an envelope in gratitude for his years of cooperation. Meanwhile, Lambrick and his son, Julian, prepare for the dinner party, discussing the strict rules of the game. Lambrick emphasizes the importance of upholding the game's integrity, though Julian seems less enthusiastic. Lambrick warns him to avoid interfering with or getting too close to the guests, while Bevins, the butler, is ready to handle anyone who gets eliminated from the game. Julian is told he may observe and interact with the guests, but that he's underdressed, prompting him to make a quick change. Bevins, the butler, then opens the door to the salon where he instructs the guests to leave all their belongings, including phones. Although Conway protests, Bevins calmly states that these are simply the rules, and the group reluctantly complies. With all items left behind, the butler leads them to the dining room, where they find their pre-assigned seats waiting. As everyone settles in, Lambrick and his son join them, offering a formal welcome, and soon Bevins and his team serve the first course, setting an unsettling but lavish tone for the evening ahead. Iris, a lifelong vegetarian, hasn't mentioned her dietary choice, and Linda curiously asks her about it. Before Iris can respond, Lambrick seizes the moment, offering her $5,000 and then $10,000 to eat the steak on her plate. Reluctantly, and with clear discomfort, Iris begins eating as Lambrick comments on how many contempt people do abandon their principles. Sensing another opportunity to test his guests, Lambrick turns to Conway, who has declined the wine, and asks about his choice. Conway explains he's been sober for 16 years, but Lambrick's eyes gleam with a sinister intention to push his guests even further. Lambrick mocks Conway's sobriety, yet claims he wants to help him, offering $10,000 if he drinks the wine. When Conway declines, Lambrick raises the stakes, offering $50,000 if he finishes an entire bottle of scotch. Devastated, Conway finally gives in, painfully drinking the scotch as Lambrick laughs and applauds his choice, relishing the control his money brings. As the meal ends, Conway slumps drunkenly at the end of the table, and the guests, uneasy and bewildered, watch as Lambrick announces the real event is about to begin a game. With a chilling smile, he explains that they'll be playing a twisted version of the classic Would You Rather game, leaving everyone braced for what's to come. Lambrick explains the rules of the game. In each round, players will be forced to choose between two dreadful options, with the choices becoming increasingly difficult as the game progresses. To demonstrate, he uses Travis as an example, though he warns the others that the real challenges will be far harder. As the game unfolds, players are gradually eliminated, and the last one standing will claim victory. Curious, Lucas asks how players are eliminated, to which Lambrick coldly replies that anyone unable to continue, for any reason, will be out of the game. Iris then inquires what happens if someone refuses to make a choice, and Lambrick's response is chilling refusal means immediate elimination as well. Bevins steps forward and places a clock on the table as Lambrick explains the rules. Each dilemma is timed, giving players just 15 seconds to make their choice. If they don't decide in time, they'll be eliminated. Lambrick adds that the goal of the game is to determine who truly deserves the Lambrick's help. He then offers them a chance to leave if they no longer wish to participate. Conway stands up, briefly considering the option, but then takes the money and sits back down, resigned. The game begins. Bevins brings in car batteries, explaining that they were tools he used during his time in MI6 as an interrogator. The room is stunned, but it's Conway who reacts first, his face showing the gravity of what's about to unfold. Conway, unable to bear the pressure, stands up and tries to leave, but when Lambrick calmly informs him that he's missed his chance to walk away, he curses at Lambrick and makes a move to exit. Suddenly, Bevins shoots him, and the room freezes. The others are forced back into their seats, their compliance ensured at gunpoint by Bevins and his team. Lambrick coldly announces that participation is no longer optional, and the game must go on. The tension rises as Bevins places a car battery on Cal's head, while Lambrick explains that Cal now has a choice: he can either zap himself or zap Amy, who has the same device placed on her head. With the timer ticking down, Cal makes his choice and zaps himself. Bevins places the contraption on Linda's head, and Amy is forced to choose who will get shocked. Without hesitation, Amy electrocutes the elderly woman, her hands steady before Lambrick can even finish explaining the rules. Linda briefly faints from the shock, but Bevins swiftly revives her for her turn. Reluctant, Linda protests, but Peter, equally unwilling, says he can't do it either, and so, With a resigned look, she shocks him. Meanwhile, Dr. Barden retrieves his gun from a drawer and leaves his house, driving off in his car. Back at the game, the challenge continues between Travis and Lucas. Having already been shocked, Travis shocks Lucas, then, regaining some clarity, he assures Iris that he can take one more shock and promises not to hurt her. Terrified, Iris hesitates as Bevins places the contraption on her head, but Lucas, unable to take the pressure, electrocutes himself and faints. Now, it's Iris's turn to choose between herself and Cal, and with a heavy heart, she electrocutes herself. The first round concludes, and the players are given a brief moment to collect themselves while Dr. Barden speeds toward the Lambrick estate. Left alone in the dining room, the remaining players begin to strategize, quietly discussing how they might escape. Just then, Julian enters, mocking them, which triggers Travis's frustration. He confronts Julian, but the son coldly warns him that he's just made a big mistake. One of Bevins's men walks in, and Julian orders him to cover the walls and the area around the table with plastic, preparing for what's to come. Travis, still seething with anger, is momentarily calmed by Lucas, who tries to reason with him and the others, warning that Lambrick wants them to turn on each other. Lucas urges them to stick together, but the rest are skeptical, believing that unity won't save them. Meanwhile, Dr. Barden arrives at the estate, parks his car, and swiftly jumps over the fence. Lambrick returns to the dining room, announcing that the second round will begin, and this time, they'll have 30 seconds to make their choices. He starts the game with Iris. Lambrick presents Iris with a brutal choice. Would she rather stab Cal in the thigh with an ice pick or whip Travis 3 times? Travis, ever the martyr, urges her to choose him, assuring her he can handle the pain. As they prepare, Lambrick warns Travis that it will hurt, and Bevins demonstrates how to strike. The first hit is too weak to count, so Iris steels herself and hits him harder, leaving 3 bloody marks across his skin. Next, it's Lucas's turn, facing the same cruel decision, whether to stab Iris with the ice pick or whip Travis again. Understanding the risks, the men agree it's safer to choose the whipping, as stabbing someone in the thigh could be fatal. Lucas strikes Travis with the whip, and Julian watches with an unsettling pleasure, reveling in Travis's pain. Lucas apologizes, but Lambrick quickly presents his own cruel dilemma. Should Travis stab Lucas, or will he endure 3 more lashes from Bevins? Torn, Travis can't bring himself to do it and desperately asks what he's done wrong. With no other choice, he opts for the whip again. Lucas, desperate for him to change his mind and stab him instead, is told by the Lambricks that it's against the rules. Bevins delivers the lashes, brutalizing Lucas's back. As Lucas grimaces in pain, he tells Iris that he needs medical attention immediately. Meanwhile, Dr. Barden draws closer to the estate, halting his car and hiding when he spots a guard outside. Back at the table, it's Peter's turn to face the brutal choice, the ice pick or 3 more lashes for Travis. If he chooses the ice pick, it will have to be used on Linda, reluctant to hurt a woman but unable to bear seeing Travis suffer anymore. Peter argues that Linda, being paralyzed, won't feel a thing. He convinces her to let him do it, asking her to close her eyes. Lucas guides him on how to use the ice pick, and Peter hesitates before stabbing Linda, convinced he's hit an artery. Lambrick, unfazed, moves on to Linda's turn. Once again, she must choose between Travis or the ice pick, this time aimed at Amy. Peter is tending to Linda's wound when, in a sudden and shocking move, she grabs the ice pick and stabs Amy, who retaliates with a slap. This turn of events delights Lambrick, who now shifts the focus to Amy. He presents her with a choice: whip Travis again or choose any player she wishes to stab. Amy, with a cold realization, looks at Linda and reminds everyone that the game is about survival. Not helping one another elimination is the key. Standing up, Amy decides to stab Iris, asking if she can strike anywhere. Lambrick begins to answer, but before he can finish, Amy plunges the ice pick into Iris's waist. Lucas, horrified, tries to help her, but the chaos escalates as Travis suddenly collapses. As the chaos unfolds, Dr. Barden sneaks around to a different part of the house, making his way into the basement with his gun ready. Back in the dining room, Bevins checks on Travis, relieved to find he's still breathing. However, Peter draws their attention to Linda, who is now unconscious. Bevins examines her and declares her dead, promptly wheeling her away. The game moves forward, and the next choice is Cal's. Finish Travis off or stab Lucas. Struggling with his conscience, Cal begins to agree with Amy he must eliminate someone. In a grim decision, he chooses to lash Travis again, who is barely alive, his body limp and battered. As Cal sits back down, he tells Iris that it had to be done, but she vehemently disagrees. Lambrecht announces that the second round is over and approaches Bevins, asking about Travis. Bevins informs him that while Travis is still alive, he can no longer continue the game. Lambrecht decides to move Travis out and informs the others. He then whispers something to Julian, consulting quietly with Bevins. Meanwhile, Lucas leans over to Iris and asks if she could make a run for it. In a sudden burst of action, Cal jumps up and strikes one of the guards with the whip. Chaos erupts as everyone stands, fighting the guards off, with Julian being shoved to the ground in the midst of the struggle. Amid the chaos, Lucas fights with Bevins while one of the guards grabs Iris, but she quickly stabs him with the ice pick. Cal lashes him in retaliation, then moves toward Lambrecht, determined to strike him with the whip. Before he can, Lambrecht shoots him and coldly orders everyone back to the table, including Julian. The remaining players reluctantly return to their seats, but Julian soon realizes Iris is missing. Lambrecht sends him and Bevins to find her, and though Iris manages to escape, she's still trapped inside the house, evading Bevins as he searches the second floor. Meanwhile, Julian catches up with her, violently pulling her back and brutally beating her, his intentions darkening as he plans to rape her. As Iris's screams echo through the house, both Bevins upstairs and Dr. Barden in the basement hear her distress. In a desperate act, Iris stabs Julian with the ice pick and pushes him off, but just as she's regaining her bearings, Barden appears, promising to get her out of there. However, before he can act, he's shot dead by Bevins. Julian, in a twisted fit of anger, orders Bevins to shoot Iris too, but the battler coolly informs him that his father will be very disappointed in him. He then decides to take Iris back to the game while Julian is dragged upstairs and left there. Iris follows quietly, and when she returns, Lambrecht greets her with a smile, asking about Julian's fate. Bevins informs Lambrecht of what happened, prompting him to check on his son. Meanwhile, Iris asks about Cal, and Lucas solemnly tells her that he's dead. Amy, her voice tinged with anger, warns that they won't be allowed to leave, and Iris reluctantly agrees with her. Lambrecht returns, offering a hollow apology to Iris for his son's actions, and insists on continuing the game. However, Amy erupts in frustration, claiming that Iris shouldn't still be allowed to compete after almost getting them all killed. Peter backs her up, but Lambrecht swiftly asserts his authority, reminding everyone who is in charge. As tensions rise, the next round begins with a heavy barrel being rolled into the dining room, signaling the game is far from over. The tension in the room builds as Lambrecht hands out envelopes containing cards with punishments, giving the players a grim choice: face the known, the water barrel, or take a risk with the unknown, the potentially harsher consequences hidden inside the envelopes. Lucas, seeking clarity, asks about the barrel, and Lambrecht coldly explains that they'll be submerged in water for 2 minutes. Peter, the first to decide, believes he's cracked the game and begins analyzing his options. As Bevins starts the timer, Peter continues his calculations before ultimately choosing the envelope. With a grim determination, he opens the card inside, revealing a strange symbol, its meaning yet unknown. Lambrecht swiftly interprets the symbol on Peter's card as a firecracker, which Peter smugly believes is a minor punishment. Confident in his decision, he's shocked when Lambrecht hands him dynamite instead. Lambrecht calmly tells him he must move away from the table, and Bevins secures the explosive to Peter's hand. With a grim smile, Peter lights the fuse, only for the dynamite to explode in his hand, sending him into unconsciousness. Lambert moves closer to inspect the damage as Bevins suggests Peter might be having a heart attack, but it's too late. Peter is already dead. As the tension hangs in the air, Lucas becomes the next to face his fate. Lucas, terrified of the idea of enduring 2 minutes underwater, decides to choose the envelope instead. When he opens it, his card reveals a disturbing symbol of an eye, which Lambert coldly explains means he must slit his own eye open with a razor. Begging and pleading, Lucas insists he can't do it, but Lambert gives him a cruel ultimatum: cut his eye or die, with just 30 seconds to decide. Iris, horrified, watches him struggle, tears streaming down her face, while Amy looks away in discomfort. In the end, Lucas reluctantly performs the gruesome act. Meanwhile, Iris, unwilling to take such a dangerous risk, chooses the water barrel. Lambert sets the timer, and Bevins forces her under the water. As Iris thrashes and fights for air, Amy can't bear to watch. As Iris struggles underwater, she is overwhelmed by a flashback of her brother telling her about a dream where he drowned, and she tried, but failed, to save him. Desperately fighting for breath, she begins to lose hope, but Bevins holds her down even tighter. Just as she nears the brink of drowning, the 2 minutes pass, and she miraculously survives, defying everyone's expectations. Gasping for air, she watches Lucas ask about her card, and Lambert coldly tells him to check it. Lucas reveals a card with a tooth, and Lambert explains it was a close call. Her card meant she would have had all her teeth extracted. Bevins, visibly disappointed, mutters, "Maybe next year." With only Amy left, she chooses the envelope, revealing her dark past where her husband drowned their child, and she refuses to face the barrel. Unfortunately for Amy, her card also means she must face the barrel, but with the added twist of staying submerged for an additional 2 minutes. She steps into the barrel, and Lambert sets the timer once more. As Bevins forces her under, Iris watches helplessly, unable to do anything as Amy begins to drown. In a final moment of stillness, Amy stops struggling, and Bevins pulls her out, but it's too late. Lambert, visibly disappointed, reveals he had hoped for her to win. With only Iris and Lucas left, he directs Iris to sit across from him for the final round. Before it begins, Lambert speaks, praising the game as one of the best he's ever played, and expressing that, in the end, he would be truly happy if either of them were to win. Lambert announces that the final round will be decided by a coin toss to determine who goes first. Heads for Iris, tails for Lucas. Bevins flips the coin, and it's heads, so Iris takes the first turn. Lambert then presents her with the ultimate would you rather. She can either end the game, leaving them both empty-handed, or eliminate Lucas and take everything for herself. Lucas, expecting her to make the right choice, begins explaining why he came to the dinner party, but before he can finish, Iris shoots him point blank, sealing her fate in the game. Lambert, Bevins, and all the staff applaud Iris for winning, congratulating her on her victory. "Bravo," they cheer, as she is handed the money and informed that a donor for her brother has been found. Lambert asks her to thank him for his generosity, and she does before walking away. Iris returns home, sets everything down, and checks on her brother, thinking he's just asleep. She washes up, prepares for bed, and then goes to check on him again. To her horror, she realizes he hasn't moved at all. Turning him over, she sees that he is dead.